Hello. Come. Megan. Come.
Hi.
Yay, it works.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Hello. So we'll just wait a couple minutes for everyone to get on. I actually just, normally I would be on 5 minutes before. I wouldn't be on exactly at the time. It's just that I just taught a course at Biola University. I just finished our first class 10 minutes ago, and I thought I could just stay in the classroom I was in and do this. And it turned out there was another class coming in that had not signed up. So I ran across the campus and found a room that I could sit in to do this with you. I got here exactly at 4:30. You can all hear me all right, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Is that your first time teaching at Biola?
I actually taught here 10 years ago.
Okay.
I was an adjunct here 10 years ago. But it's actually, the school has actually both upgraded in terms of sort of the excellence of the education, but also become actually much more rigid in its conservative theology. It's a little bit of a miracle that I'm teaching here, actually.
Yeah, I've heard about the transitions, and so I was was surprising to me.
They really wanted me, so we
All right.
lived with some things that I didn't think they were going to live with.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So,
Are you staying cool down there?
Ew, no, we are in 103-degree weather here.
Whew.
Yeah. Are you from?
I mean, it's 91 here, but that's hot for Santa Barbara.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone is in the tail end of summer, but except maybe come.
Yep.
It's not summer where you are.
No.
Yeah. Well, this is. Oh, hello, welcome. What's your name?
Say it again.
Oh,
I unmuted it. What's your name? What's your name?
Patrick.
Patrick. Well, welcome, Patrick. You can be the youngest member of our class today. You're welcome. How old are you, Patrick?
I need to go eat my dinner, but I can't have my fruit pizza yet because Mommy's not going to do it yet.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to go. Daddy, not you.
So, let's get started, brothers and sisters. Does anybody feels moved to lead us in prayer? The Spanish word is ganas, which is a desire from within to lead in prayer. It's a desire from within to do anything. And I always think the person should pray who has ganas to do it. I'm a little, because of running across campus, I'm a little discombobulated. So it'd be great if somebody else feels led to do that. Anyone willing to lead us in prayer?
I can pray. I was just.
All right.
Oh, that's Matt.
No, go ahead.
I was just finishing a mouthful of food. Sorry. But I'll go ahead. Dear God, thank you so much for this first class and in a new semester. And I pray that we really learn well together and work well together and get a good understanding of what the course will look like tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to learn from Dr. Salvatierra, and I pray that you would just be with all of those who weren't able to join us tonight. And again, thanks for this time. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Right, so this is, as Katie just said, this is really an opportunity to get to know each other a little better. I'd like to get a sense of you all. Even, the great thing about hybrid versus pure online is that we will have the chance to really get to know each other in the intensive time. But I want to make sure even between now and then that the educational interventions that I give you are helpful for you. So knowing a little bit about who you are and what your background is really helpful for me. And then it's always very important, I think, too, to begin to build a sense of being a class together, which will build, of course. You're all not newcomers to this, so you know that will build online regardless. But just meeting each other, I think, at the beginning of the class, getting to know me a little bit, getting to know each other makes that easier. And there's also a couple of the requirements in the class that are often a little confusing from people. So I would just want to make sure that we're very clear up front about what I expect. So I wanted to just take a couple moments initially first to introduce more about myself, and then to go around and have you share more about yourselves. And I'm very interested as you think about what you're prepared to share. I'm really interested in where you come from. And in the United States, when people want to get to know each other, the first question they ask is, what do you do? But anywhere else in the world, they ask, where are you from? And they mean, who are your people, right? What are your roots? So where are you from? You can answer in different ways, wherever it makes sense to you. Do you want to talk about your faith community? Do you want to talk about where you were born? Do you want to talk about where you live? That just gives me a real sense of you, like where are you from? The second thing I want to know is, what kind of experience have you had with community organizing, if any? And what impression do you have of it? And then lastly, I really want to know if you are bringing any questions to this class that I can make sure that we keep in mind. So starting with myself, I am from Los Angeles, and I am really from LA. That is where I am from. My grandparents came from Mexico and Russia, but they both came from the anti-church traditions in those countries, so they were socialist. My parents are not socialist, nor are my parents religious. They sort of ended up with none of it. But I became a Christian in the Jesus movement of the 1970s. And I have been a Lutheran pastor for 30 years. I was one of the first women ordained in my denomination, but I call myself Luther Costal because it sounds like a disease, because I am Lutheran theology and Pentecostal spirituality with a touch of liberation theology. So that's who I am. I have done a lot of different kinds of ministries over those 30 years, but I have been involved before I was ordained, so now almost 40 years of engagement in different forms of community ministry. That's community development, community organizing, advocacy, but often and increasingly with a specific focus on the unique role that the church can play in the broader movement. So that's always my focus, is what do we bring that if we're not there won't be brought? And how do we organize our people to bring it? So that's, I worked internationally. I was a missionary in the Philippines for 3 years. And I have worked in a variety of different kinds of contexts in the United States. Currently, I am an assisting pastor, very part-time assisting pastor. I'm in a denomination which requires that, if the bishop requires it, and mine does. But I also am an affiliate professor at Fuller Theological Seminary, and then I'm adjunct at 5 other schools. So I'm doing a lot of different kinds of teaching in different contexts. And I am also organizing, because as a community organizer, you don't have any integrity if you're just teaching it. You have to actually be living it. So I am living it in a couple of different ways right now in my life. One is that I direct something called the Guardian Angels program, which engages church volunteers and student volunteers in accompanying unaccompanied children and youth fleeing the violence in Central America as refugees in the United States and their families as they go through the court system. So we have volunteers in there walking with them. We're called the Guardian Angels. And then I also am on the local and national steering committees of Matthew 25, which is a bipartisan Christian movement to help and defend the vulnerable in the name of Jesus at this particular moment in history, with a particular focus on immigrants. So that's who I am right now. I think the only other thing I would share with you is that I have a wonderful 24-year-old daughter who's an activist, who's the light of my life. And in fact, she's just moving back to Los Angeles tonight after being gone for 6 years. So I'm very excited about that. When our time together is over, I'm going to drive an hour or so and get to see my kids. So I remember when she was Patrick's age, though. You never forget. It's always there. So, I think this is my 5th year teaching at Eastern. That would be the only other thing I would add. And I think your program is really interesting, one of the best of its kind in the country. So I'm going to talk more about the class and the requirements later. Now I want to hear from you. And please feel free if you have any questions for me, too. But I think I'll call on you around the circle so that, that makes it a little simpler. So I'll start with the bottom of the screen. So Emily, can you share?
I just had a feeling that I would be first. I'm Emily Woodmaster. I live in Toccoa, Georgia. Currently, I have been here since 2008. It's also where I went to my undergrad. It was at Toccoa Falls College, and I just fell in love with the small rural area, ironically enough, and stuck around. I am originally from 45 minutes south of Chicago. I grew up there. We came down here for a quote-unquote better life, but whatever. I made it to Georgia, and I know that it was definitely God's plan to do that because of where I am today. As far as community organizing goes, the biggest reason that I'm in this program now is because I want to start a community center here in the community that I live in. It is a very, for those of you who have been in classes before, you've heard me say it's a very dichotomous, I guess. City, we're very rural in location, but very urban in personality and how we develop. And there is nothing currently in our area that is really developing our area because people are pushing for it to stay rural, and then we have the outsiders coming in trying to make it urban. And there's just a lot of tension going on. And I'm just trying to run a center. That's all I want to do.
Are you currently running a center, Emily, or are you wanting to start it?
We want to start one. We've been working towards it, and I hope that this is the push that we need to make it happen. And we just recently, about 6 months ago, an organization kind of, came from, I don't even, I wish I could tell you guys where it happened, but it's called Vets Haven. And it is helping our veterans transition from homelessness into a stable life. I didn't even know up until a year ago when I met the founder that this was an issue in Toccoa. So it really opened my eyes, and I have since joined her board in doing that. And we have housed 9 of the vets that live here in Toccoa. So that's super exciting. They have jobs, their kids are in school, they're being cared for.
So, oops, you're back again. You were gone for a second, Emily. So do you bring any questions to this class that you hope the class will have?
No, actually, no. I'm really just excited to take the class. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say and what we're supposed to get out of this class. This is probably, no offense to all the other profs, but I think this is going to be my favorite. We'll
I hope so. Yeah, great. Thank you. And I will say a little bit about how I understand the relationship between community development and community organizing. I want to share, I think, a little bit with that verbally with you before we end today, because I think it'll be helpful, particularly listening, Emily. What you're doing. Rachel.
I am from Michigan originally. I grew up in Michigan. I live outside of Philadelphia, about an hour outside in Pottstown. I'm actually moving in a little over a week to Westchester, which is also a little bit outside of Pottstown, or outside of Philadelphia, rather. I've been in the Philadelphia area for 12 years, and every time I say that, I can't believe it's been that long. I moved here to participate in Mission Year, and I lived in Philadelphia for a year, and that was kind of where I developed a passion for issues within the city, and just kind of realizing how interconnected different problems are. And when you start to look at one problem, you kind of peel back the layers and you see how they're connected to all of these other issues. And in this program to kind of try to figure out what to do about that. And not necessarily just addressing things on an individual level, but trying to figure out how do we really create change for people or with people within a community rather than just individual. I don't have any family where I am, so my friends at work and at church kind of serve as my family here. So it's taken a while to kind of develop that, but it's nice. I feel like I have a good group of people that I'm really well connected with, that kind of have holidays with, and things like that. So and then
experience.
Yeah, I don't really have any specific experience with community organizing per se. I mean, just little things here and there that might kind of fall in line with that. So I work with adults with autism, and one of the things that I do is work to get them connected to their communities that they live in, and that sometimes is challenging. The community is not always receptive, and I would love to be able to work kind of from both ends with the individuals with autism, but then also with the communities to kind of encourage acceptance and inclusion. So I think that kind of in a different sort of way falls in line. It's not exactly community organizing, but and then I guess I'm really interested in terms of like a question. It's not really, it's sort of a vague question, but how to create change, not necessarily just for individuals or even for a specific community, but how to really move that to a larger movement that's going to create change for whether that's nationally or even internationally.
Right. How do you move to scale?
Yeah.
And what you were even asking earlier with this question of, how do we not just help individuals, but how do we actually change?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Jade.
Hi. I am originally from Pueblo, Colorado, and that's actually where I live currently. I left and went to Tennessee for a while for school, but I'm back now. My whole family, well, my mom's side of the family lives in Pueblo, so it's a little crazy sometimes. They are a very large Hispanic family, and they all live like on the same block or within 2 blocks. And then
yes, my mother can never understand why I don't live on the same block.
Yeah, my dad said no, so they live 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
It's very funny. My grandmother's happy that I don't live 20 minutes away, but I don't live on the same block. My experience with community organizing, I did a lot, probably most of it in Tennessee. In college, I worked with a community development project. They were very racially divided, and so we worked to kind of bridge that gap in different areas. So we worked a lot with mobilizing families and just kind of helping them realize that they had the power to make a change, or so kind of what their needs were and what we could do with that. So a lot of things with school systems I worked with, because that was where their needs primarily were.
Right.
And then
Jade, was that part of a larger network like IF or PICO or Gamaliel or DART, or was that an independent?
No, it was an independent nonprofit, and they did a lot of other things in the community, and they started branching out. They primarily worked in in the beginning, a lot of utility assistance or emergency relief, and then realized that the issue was much bigger, and so they started a
So they were a direct service, and then they realized that they needed
Right. So they started working just more in development areas, and it kind of just grew from there. So yeah, and then I worked with the homeless population in a community cafe. So it was like a pay-as-you-can cafe. And we just wanted to be a place that we could build community. So we worked on random projects, everything from helping them have access to food. There was a large food desert issue, so working with seed libraries and urban gardens and community members that worked in those, to small things like using the talents of community members and having them play music outside of places with community pianos and different things like that, which I learned I was really bad at playing the piano. And so that's my main experience right now. I work for a church who is not very community focused, and so it's been different to see it on the other side, reasons why they don't want to be involved in the community or don't believe that's their place. So it's been interesting. And so I think my biggest question coming in is just related to that a little bit of how do you, I guess, help individuals see the need for community organizing, or move about that in an area where people don't see the need? How do you make it effective when you have individuals that are very, very against being involved, I guess?
That's a good one. We will spend a lot of time on that. It's really, if we take seriously that this is God's call that we're responding to, and if we take seriously that we have unique gifts to bring, and if we don't bring them, they won't be there.
Yeah.
It's really important to move the church, not just the few of us who want to do it. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. Thank you. Katie.
Hey, hey, I'm Katie Ton. I am the where are you from question is always kind of hard just because my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved around a lot. I was born in the Netherlands, came back to the U.S. when I was about 4, lived in Texas and Oklahoma, and I graduated high school in Okinawa, Japan. But my family, my roots are Texan mostly. There's like a family ranch that's been in the family over 150 years in West Texas. I went to, the longest place I've ever lived anywhere is in Abilene, Texas, which is in West Texas, because I went there for.
I know Abilene. I've been there.
Did you visit one of the schools or?
No, it was many years ago.
Okay. because there are 3 Christian universities there. I went to Hardin-Simmons, which is the Baptist one. So I was there and then worked there for 4 years with refugees. Loved doing that. But my husband and I, we now live outside Philadelphia and came up here for grad school and are hoping to stay. We're here for at least 1 more year, we know. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing now. Like I said, my family's mostly Texan. But, you know, if you trace it back, it's like they came from Tennessee and they came from West Pennsylvania and they were Canada or whatever.
A Texan is a very distinct culture.
Oh, yeah.
Very. I love Texas personally, which other Californians cannot understand, but I do. I really love Texas. I've actually been called an honorary Texan. But we could talk more about why.
Yeah.
But it's a distinct culture.
Yeah. It's definitely
the three cultures in Texas. The white one, the black one, and the brown one think that they're different, but they're all really Texan. That's what's true.
Yeah. That's cool. I feel like my experience has been so different because a lot of the places I lived, I had friends from different countries. Even when I was in Texas and Oklahoma, I mean, my family's Texan, but I think it's kind of changed. Like, you know, if I try and think like how many Hispanic Texas friends did I have, or Hispanic African-American friends, or African-American Texan friends, there weren't a lot. I had a lot of African friends and I had Indian friends and I had, and so I'm not really sure. That's just kind of like how my life worked out. And then when I was in university, I hung out with all the international students and then I married one. So I wasn't really hanging out with like the people who were from West Texas. But I'm, you know, that's still a big part of who I am, is being Texan. And then one of my grandmothers was born in Zimbabwe when it was Rhodesia. And her side of the family is mostly in South Africa now. And so that makes me 3rd generation from her, or second. Second, my mom was born here, I was born here. Anyway, so there's some non-Americanness. Anyway.
Yes, well, no wonder you end up working with refugees. That seems like a really natural fit.
Yeah, I would just really enjoy that population. But so working with community organizing, my experience, I haven't really done any community organizing. I think I've just participated in other people's community organizing efforts. You know, Power in Philadelphia does a lot of community organizing. There are Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild. And so my church is a member organization, and I've participated in a few things. One of them was their education apartheid thing, where there's unequal education funding in Pennsylvania. And so we, you know, had a big movement to go to Harrisburg and had a rally inside the Capitol building, had a drum line. These kids were doing a drum line. It was pretty cool. And so participating in other people's organizing, but I've never organized myself. And my impressions of it, just from a class last semester, is that I didn't really realize the distinction between community development, organizing, and community building, and how they're distinct, but I think all really necessary. And so I'm kind of interested. I don't know if it has to be one thing comes first before the other, but you know, if you need to build
in the relationship between them.
Different
forms of community transformation.
Can you have community organizing if there's no relational, you know, relationship in the community between members? So do you have to build community first, or can it happen the other way around? It probably can, but just learning more about that.
Thank you. It's really helpful. Matthew. Hello, Matthew.
Yep, I'm here. It just took me a second to find the unmute button.
Yep. So tell us.
All right. Let's see. I tell people I was born in a suburb called Fremont, but I was raised in Oakland. So my childhood was kind of marked by 2 very different ways of living. Yeah, all white, kind of very comfortable suburbia family. My sister was in the hospital a lot, which was in West Oakland, and I grew up playing hockey, which was in East Oakland. And so I spent the majority of my childhood in those areas, and those really shaped me. They left me with a lot of questions because my white suburbia family didn't have the answers. And so that kind of sent me on a journey of answering those questions, diving in, going deeper. I guess it brought me here. And so let's see, that's family, that's roots. Church life is, I wasn't raised in the church or anything, but I am currently, I won't say there's a denomination that I've particularly found. I've described it to somebody that I'm Mennonite in theology, charismatic in spirit, and
Pentecostal. Like I'm
so it's like I kind of laughed when you said Luther Costo earlier. I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of funny. So but yeah, I mean, that's just still, I don't know, I don't feel like that's that important for me to figure out, but I don't know, I'm more inspired by liberation theology, and I guess black soul gospel, black folk gospel. So wow, organizing experience, that's really kicked up a notch the past year or so. My first experience with organizing was for a campaign called Ignite, which stands for Increased Graduation, Not Incarceration, Transformational Education. And so that was my first experience, and it was interesting. It was very student run, kind of just asking for demands, kind of reinvestment kind of ideas, and it was powerful. There's people sharing their voice and speaking out, and so and getting groups of people with like-minded interests together, and so. And it was a good first taste. I didn't have that much time to invest in it, but moving forward to today, I am organizing for something called Whites Against Racism, which is something that is launching on Monday.
Wow.
And a branch of that is there's a branch underneath that called Courage, which stands for Christians United for Racial and Economic Justice. And so that's more specifically like church focused. And so those are my own personal organizing campaigns, but I've recently been working on a movement called Abolish the 13th, because it still endorses slavery. And so it's partnering with the Millions for Prisoners March.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yeah, and it was out in Riverside actually, so I was down there. And Sanctuary Church movement, so providing sanctuary protection for undocumented folks. I'm part of Surge, so I do a lot of paper passing and emailing with them. It's probably one of my least favorite things about organizing is email chains. So I'm looking to get away from email chain models as much as possible, but I know it's probably not inevitable. So, or it's probably inevitable, I guess I should say. And I do restorative justice work, so there's some organizing I do with that. We're trying to get a community engagement between the police department and community members like Black Lives Matter, Pacific Pride Foundation, which is LGBTQ advocacy, another organization called Cause, which works with a segregated West Side, mostly folks that are living in poverty in a rich Santa Barbara. So there's still poverty here, and so they're speaking up for them. And so, so I'm part of organizing for that and working with police relations, and that's.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of work.
Yeah, I guess that's the best way to summarize it. So,
what's your question that you bring? Do you bring any questions?
What's my question? Oh, I've experienced a lot of low buck, kind of everybody just doing their best or hard work in community organizing. but I guess you said something earlier about scaling, and I think that's a word that I've been sitting on a lot this past month or two. It's like, what does it look like to scale this? And scaling a movement, scaling a community, scaling a cause, scaling a business, an organization or nonprofit. And so, and then, so looking for something that has some backing. And I guess a question that I've been personally working through beyond that question is working within as a quote unquote activist or organizer, and then working in a restorative way and being relational. And so I guess as an activist, you're judged by the community of how much you can put it to the man. And when you're working with folks like the police department, you're respected by how much you can partner with the man. And so there's kind of some there's a tension there that's like you have to walk in a very fine way. And so I mean, it's kind of more of a it's not I guess intrapersonal kind of thing, but it's still a tension that I don't see many people talk about, probably because it comes from more of a restorative justice tradition, whereas activists are just kind of pushing campaign, and I guess restorative justice kind of comes from more of a relational aspect, and so I'd like to learn how to intersect those two.
Okay, that's helpful. You know, we're going to talk about serpent-dove models of being wise as serpents and innocent as doves, and that's going to unpack some of that. But thank you, Matthew. That's helpful. Come. So tell us where you are and who you are. Come, can you hear me? Okay. So where do you come from? And do you have any experience with any of this? And what are your questions?
Okay. My name is Kam No, and I'm from Myanmar, Burma, one of the country in Asia, if you never heard before. And I am a student of Palmo Theological Seminary, Eastern University. This is my second semester here in the US. So I've been here for 7 months here in the United States, experiencing a lot of new things.
Where are you living? You live in Philadelphia?
Now, currently I'm living in Philadelphia, Central City.
Yeah. So have you experienced community organizing in some form in your country? I know Myanmar has a very complicated history.
Yes, and coming back to my background, as I am born and grown up in a Baptist family, a Baptist background, and that is a very remote place, a community. I still remember feeling when I was child, like when I was in 4 or 5 years old. I used to think that United States would be like place heaven or something like that. Since I never expect that I will be able to get a chance when I grow up here in the United States. But by God's grace, I have an opportunity to stay to study here in the United States.
I think we just lost you for a second, Come. Is everybody else here? Is it me or is it you? Hello, everyone. You're okay.
And organization which is working for bringing peace and freedom, democracy for our country. Can you hear me? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I lost you for a minute completely. so I didn't get the beginning of that sentence, but you were working in Myanmar with an organization working for peace and justice?
Yeah, an organization, the name of the organization is Ethnic Nationalities Affairs Center. It can be Google. If you may find, if you Google it, EBC Burma, Ethnic Nationalities Affairs Center Burma, and the office is in Chiang Mai, which is in Thailand, and Rangoon in Burma.
Mm.
I've been involved here 6 months before coming here to the US.
Mm.
This, as I said, this organization is trying to establish the rights and freedom for the people of our country.
Mm.
And mostly this organization is trying to bring peace and reconciliation between the ethnic arms organization in the country and the government military regime. As you may know, you may heard about our government military attitudes and things like that. That's,
yeah, I know.
Yeah, I was also one of the ethnic member group in the country. So even though my background is from theology and from the seminary, I was rather involved toward the political background. So right now here in Palmo Theological Seminary, I'm taking Master of Theological Study in Public Policy.
Okay.
So, I don't know this course, community organization will be taken, but as the course for MTS programs requirement, I took this course. So I feel that this course will be very much meaningful for me as I'm having and planning to be involved again when I come back to my country. But my question is whether this community organization and that the organization that I am involved is really different or they are same. If so, if they are not different, then how to strengthen and more effectively so that this organization may become like more. I don't know how to express as I'm learning new experience as well as learning with new language, as English is not my first language. So
take your time. I know how that is.
To express with even something like that.
So I do want to say that when I was in the Philippines, it was under Marcos. I was part of the pro-democracy movement in the Philippines from 1984 to 1987. So I have experience community organizing in the Philippines under the dictator. So I do have some of that experience.
Okay, thank you.
But that is important because the text, the books that you're looking at, are mostly in the US context.
Yeah.
So you will have to translate not only the language, but the context.
Yes.
But I do give some examples from the Philippines in my book. So you will get some of that. And from Central America as well, because I've also worked in Central America.
Yeah, thank you so much.
But we appreciate the international perspective. It will be useful for everybody. It will be useful.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Megan.
Hello. So I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is a town that's about midway between DC and Richmond, Virginia. I grew up here. My parents and my sister are still here. Probably really the only time I've left for any concerted amount of time was when I went to college in Southwest Virginia.
Wow.
Actually had one of my, I have a double major, but one of my majors was in public policy and community service, and so I had to take some community organizing classes there, and one of my favorite professors that was in charge of that program had been very active in a lot of organizing in a rural context in Appalachia. And so a lot of the context or official context I have about community organizing comes from a rural context. I've always actually been more interested in the urban context. Much of the work I do is in an urban context. Currently, I am a director of a nonprofit that works with the homeless population in the city of Fredericksburg. And we primarily work with a lot of the folks that a lot of other programs don't want to serve. And so we end up kind of being a gap filler and advocating on a lot of different fronts for folks to get assistance when they really can't advocate for themselves. Before I did this work, I actually started out my working life as a reporter at the newspaper. And that's actually what I thought I was going to do with my life. Funny how things kind of transpire. But so I have experienced community organizing from a lot of different fronts. One being as a student and a very socially justice oriented student in Appalachia. I was very engaged in a lot of things as a student and learned a lot about it. And then actually as a reporter, I sort of developed a slight hate for it. Mostly because I was a government reporter and I had to sit through a lot of public hearings. And I guess where I struggle with it is that a lot of times I think sometimes people are just looking for a cause, and they don't necessarily it's not necessarily like something they're totally passionate about. It's just kind of getting on the bandwagon was what I felt like I experienced a lot of times as a reporter. Is you get somebody would have sent out some blast email and fill the room with people who honestly didn't know what they were talking about. So I have a little bit of a tension about it. However, I also know, because of my background, that community organizing can be used very productively. And I don't know that I have directly experienced a lot of productive use of it. But I know that it can be used productively. Right. And so the unique thing about my organization is we're actually, I would even go as far to say we're owned by the churches. They appoint people to our board and whatnot. So I actually, in more recent years, have found a need to be more of an organizer of the churches that I work for. Because they are very socially justice-oriented churches and want to be involved in some of those activities at a local level, and there are some challenges with that. I've also been on the receiving end of community organizing, I guess you could say. With some of the NIMBY issues that come along with sometimes things that homeless service organizations want to do, and have not quite known how to respond to that, or how to be effectively on the receiving end. So I have a whole lot of emotions about it.
Oh wow! I can just see all this mix.
And I guess if there's a question, it's really I'd like to kind of reconcile some of the different ways that I've experienced community organizing, and learn more about how to redirect it effectively, and also how to create it effectively, particularly among the churches that I work for, and how I can really engage and energize them around really important issues in our community. I mean, even sometimes you get the clergy in the room and they're like, oh, let's go do something. And it's very haphazardly, and it doesn't necessarily feel very organized.
Not productive.
So anyways, I think that's probably where I am in all of that. So.
This is so useful for me, I have to say. I also hope you can understand me because I have a really bad cold. So my voice doesn't always sound like this, but I appreciate the effort. So wow, I mean, that was a lot. It's a very rich conversation already before we move into the class at all, from just the different perspectives and experiences that you all bring. So I'm going to say some things about the class and the requirements for the class. I've given you a variety of books to read. I want to say something about the text. So community organizing in the United States, and this is only in the United States, that the father of community organizing in the United States is Saul Alinsky. And he's quite a character, but part of what is very important to understand, if you're going to understand the model he created, is that he was a secular Jew. His mother was a observant Jew, an Orthodox Jew. So he took in some of the perspectives of that faith without having faith. So there are assumptions that underlie the organizing model that is most common in the United States for community organizing, which came out of that stream. There are assumptions that are profoundly secular. There are some values that come out of at least a Jewish base, if not a Christian base, but there are assumptions about reality that are profoundly secular. What is power? What is human motivation? What is human community? All of those questions were answered by Saul Alinsky from a perspective that did not believe in a living God. At the same time, he was brilliant tactically at dealing with the carnal and sinful aspects of human beings and human society. He was brilliant. And that's why the system that he developed, in certain ways, is effective enough to have become the dominant model. So I'm having you read Saul Alinsky in his own words, because I really think that you need to understand the voice that is at the root. When I was deciding on my denomination, I took a lot of church history, because it's not always theology that defines us. It's also who we are in our roots. So I think to understand community organizing in the United States, definitely, you have to understand Saul Alinsky. So I'm having you read him. I'm having you see a short film about him and about his early work, which I tried to upload and have just recently clicked on yesterday and found out that it didn't work. I couldn't. I tried to take it from my video library where I purchased it in Amazon and put it into your module in Brightspace, and it didn't work. So you actually have to download it from Amazon directly. You can do that for a fairly cheap price renting it, and even a fairly cheap price purchasing it. So you don't need to do that to look at it. So that is important. Even though the form of the model of organizing that I advocate is faith rooted, so we have a very different set of assumptions than Alinsky does, I am bound by integrity as a professor to make sure that you really understand the secular model as well, and that you understand it actually analyzing it from a faith lens. So I am having you see The Democratic Promise, which is a movie about Alinsky, just the first 45 minutes, the first part of it, and also read Rules for Radicals, which is just a more accessible and shorter version of his philosophy than his more common. Reveal for Radicals is what is usually read. I'm having you read Rules for Radicals instead. So that's one book I'm having you read. I'm also having you read Christina Smock, because Christina Smock does a very thorough research of the most common models of organizing at the time that she was writing. And I think it gives you a broader perspective on the different forms of organizing in the US context, which some of which will relate, actually, I think very well to organizing internationally. So Christina Smock is comprehensive, it's academic, it's dense, read it anyhow. You know, she gives a lot of very practical examples. It's a very useful schema. I will update the schema when we all get together in residency, so that I bring it up to where we are now rather than when she was writing 30 years ago. I am also having you read Robert Linthicum. Robert Linthicum is the best Christian apologist of standard organizing. He really does give not just the Christian rationale, but a Christian reformulation of the tactics and strategies. I think it's just important to hear. He's well worth hearing. So have you read him as well. Adam Taylor, which is Mobilizing for Hope, is a millennial view of systems, of organizing for systems change. Different language, he doesn't use the same language. Talking about the same processes, but not the same language. He's a young African-American pastor and organizer. Well worth reading. And then Faith-Rooted Organizing is the movement that I represent. And it was a snapshot of where that movement was in 2014. You'll get the update when I'm with you. But all the texts, and then, then the other movie you're going to have to download, because again, I thought I could get it to you and I can't, is Force More Powerful. It is a series of documentaries about nonviolent struggles that won all over the world. Fascinating. There's actually some recent research that nonviolence is more effective than violence in broad context, in broad scale context for change, not just locally. So I'm having you look at part 1, section 2, which is the desegregation of Nashville. It's a very powerful movie. You will really enjoy it. It's about 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long. There's one more set of videos I'm going to have you watch around the community assessment process by a real master. His name is Michael Mata, and he's both an urban planner and a Nazarene pastor and a community developer, and he's really brilliant. That also didn't transfer over, but it's on Vimeo. I'm sure I can get the URLs to you. So those are the pieces of input that I'm giving you besides my input. The way that I like to do my input is, this is the rhythm. I like you to do the reading. I like you to respond to the weekly prompt in a little essay. I like you to respond to each other. And I tune in all the time and I watch, but I don't jump into the dialogue because I want you to interact with each other. I want you to think it through. And then I come in at the end of each week and I synthesize. I synthesize what you've said that I think is really important, what you've come to, and then I contribute. This is where I think that I want to expand what you've been saying. This is where I want to correct it or suggest some different possibilities and ideas. This is where I want to challenge you. So I'll come in either with a video or with a written essay, fairly long essay at the end of each week. So that's the rhythm that I like to use. At the same time, the major piece of work that you will each be doing this semester, which is essential for your learning, it's essential, is that I want you to pick an organization that is doing community organizing where you are. And my criteria for that organization is that they actually being about systemic change. What I mean by that is they have to really be about changing laws, policies, and or structures that have a permanent or at least a long-term impact on the lives of the people in that community. So a community development organization is usually focused on creating an alternative system. So community development and community organizing are the same when they're done with quality, in the sense that they engage local people in actually being part of public decision making, decisions that affect their lives, that affect their common life, that affect their community life. But community development is really about local people coming together with their 2 loaves and 3 fishes and doing what they can together to make their community a better place. So community development typically comes up with community gardens or affordable housing projects or community clinics, something that we can do together where we can pull some resources that maybe we got through public decision making. We can get some resources from outside and we will combine it with our own resources and we will create something together that will make our lives better. But the limits of community development are that some of the things that affect our lives, we can't change just by creating an alternative system on our own, right? So let me give an example. When I was growing up in Los Angeles, the sky was not blue. The sky was brown and gray because pollution was so bad in Los Angeles that we couldn't breathe, right? We couldn't breathe. I have lung problems that go back to my childhood. I was part of a community development effort as a kid. I didn't know that's what it was. At creating a local community health clinic because we had so many kids with asthma. So we got more affordable care for kids with asthma by all working together and creating this clinic and then raising money and getting some public money and some private money. But it didn't make the sky blue again. The only way that we can make the sky blue, which the sky is blue now in Los Angeles, we won, right? Took a long time. But we had to get laws that stopped the pollution. It was the only way to get a blue sky. We had to actually deal with a broader system than just what we could do together in our community. So I want you to be dealing with an organization, if possible, that is trying to interact with that broader system, not just trying to create an alternative system. Does that make sense? But I do want you to work with an organization, to study an organization, that is actually engaging local people. I don't want you to work with an advocacy organization that is grass tops professional advocacy. That is, World Vision has always done professional advocacy. They've always had paid lobbyists who are trying to get good policies passed. That's not community organizing. Community organizing means that that you're not just making things better, but you're empowering people in that process so that local folks get to have a real say in the public decisions that affect their lives. So I want you to work with an organization that's trying to do both of those things. I want you to study, not work with. Now, you may not be able to find that where you are. You may not. If you can't, work with a community development organization. Study, I keep saying work with, I mean study. But imagine, I want you to use your prophetic imagination. Imagine what it would look like for them to add a systems change component. And if it's a secular organization, I also want you to imagine what it would be like if they could add a more faith-rooted set of gifts and understandings. So what are you going to do? You're going to find an organization that you want to study. You're going to interview an organizer, and you're going to interview a volunteer leader, and you're going to attend some kind of community activity of that organization that is about creating change. I know very well that there may not be one that is very focused on legislative change or policy change or even structure change. While in the time of this semester, you may have to settle for an educational event or a community building event. Bueno. The event that is most, that they think that organization thinks it will be a very important event in achieving their purposes, or an important event. Look for the best you can. So it's one event, one interview with an organizer, one interview with a volunteer leader. Because organizations are overwhelmingly busy, it will be an organizing task to get that to happen. I very well recognize that. But I want to see you do 2 interviews and attend an event I want you to report, what were the goals of that event? What did they achieve? And you have all kinds of questions that I put in there for you to look at around that are suggestions, not mandates, about trying to really get to what's happening. So a real report, what is happening? What did you hear? Who is this person? Why are they doing what they're doing? What helps them do this? What kind of training did they get? Where are they succeeding? Where are they failing? So I really want a report on the interviews and a report on the action. But then I really want an analysis from everything you're learning. What are they doing well? And what could they do better? And how would they do it better? What would it look like if they were really doing the best job possible? Does that make sense? You're going to take all semester to do it. I used to be very organized by about saying by this date you have to have this interview, by this date you have to have this interview, by this date. No. Your organization, every organization is different. You may get to go to the activity before you ever get to interview anybody, right? You may get to interview somebody and then the activity and then the other person. However you could make it work, my friends. But you understand where I want you to get by the end. Because this process, in my experience of teaching now this for 10 years, this is what people learn the most, is by comparing your reading and your reflection and your group reflection with your actual experience on the ground. Many of you have experience, but it's different when you're looking from the outside and you're really getting a chance to compare these materials and these insights. Does that make sense? Do you have questions about it? Any questions? Are you you look a little bit worried. Are you okay? You think you can do this? Yeah. It's fine for me also, if you're working with an organization you already know. You don't have to do one that you don't know. You'll be seeing it from a different perspective, even if you know it. I've had actually someone do an organization they were organizing for, and they saw it from a different perspective. So that's your most important assignment. That's your core assignment. You do need to do an essay and 3 to 4 comments every week, because you do lose important points if you miss one. You really need to get to it every week. Even if you write something short, better short than nothing. 3 comments are fine. Some people need to do 4 because it's how they work. But 3 comments is what I require. Near the end, you will do a personal reflection about how what you're learning this semester will be useful in your future life. And at the end, I do give you a case study for your final exam. So that's it. Those are all the requirements. Any questions about any of it?
Do you have a typical or an ideal length that you would want for an essay? I hear the word essay and I think like that's something very lengthy.
No, it's not lengthy. I used to give 750 words, and then I realized that there were people who could answer the question in 300 to 500. I want you to answer the question, and I want to see that you've done the reading. So if you're accurately quoting a couple of sources, I'm like, cool, that person has done the reading, right? You can do that in 300 words. God bless you, dear. You could do it, right? If it takes you 750 to really engage with the question and the materials, that's what it takes. But that's a range, 300 to 750, somewhere in there. Right? I have had people do it shorter, and I've had them need longer, but that's typical range. Right? For the final project, I don't have any. Again, I think there are people who write in very compact ways, and there are people who write in very flowery ways. I just care about, and I don't care about how academic it sounds at all. I care that you are wrestling with the concepts, that you are taking the authors seriously and wrestling with their work. Yeah, that's what I care about, that you've really done the critical thinking. and the spiritual struggling. I am available. I am not immediately available, and I'm not endlessly available, but I really do want to help you do this learning. So if you want to set up time with me, you are welcome to do that. Zoom time like this, individual calls, email exchanges, whatever you need. If there's something you're not understanding, please contact me. I want to be there. And I'm a pastor first and a professor second. So if something comes down in your life, if life intervenes, we will work out alternative ways to meet requirements. So don't worry about that. Synchronized sessions are important for reflecting on the work together in a way that we really can't when we're doing it in person. I do with this class, is my only class that I teach. When you're doing when you have people all over the world, they won't let you require synchronized sessions. So synchronized sessions can only be optional. I really like synchronized sessions. I think they really matter. And I usually do webinars as part of them. So it is important to come if you can. Because what I'll do with a synchronized session is I'll take the opportunity to clarify questions that I've seen emerging over and over again with adding some additional material. So they are important if you can make them. And they're the hardest thing to make up, even though we do record our sessions. So you will be able to listen. Any other questions or comments?
I was going to say kind of related to that, Caitlin Durst had messaged me earlier today, and I don't know if she got the opportunity to email you. She was supposed to be on this call, but she was at work and didn't have a charger for her phone, which is what she was going to use to call in. So she wanted me to tell you, and I meant to say it at the beginning, but I forgot. So
well, this session is being recorded, and I will send it to her. And this session was not, this was important for community building and for my understanding of you, but I'm going to need alone time with her to hear more of her story, probably. And I'll set that up with her. Okay. But we didn't do any more, we didn't do a lot of content on this session, so it was a little, but not a lot. So we went a little faster than I thought. And I want to sit for a second just to see if anybody else has any other questions, or if you have any questions for me, and if you have any questions for me that you want to ask right now, we can do that. I think I do want to respond to say that I feel like I am a specialist in moving the church, conservative churches, into engagement. I am in the middle of a doctoral study on Hispanic immigrant pastors who have made that transition. So I'm learning about it, actually I'm studying it. But I really want to share a word of encouragement that it's really possible. I also think it's really possible to find the right balance of confrontation and collaboration. So that goes to Matthew. But, I think there's lots of good models out there. And going to Megan, I do want to say that there's really bad community organizing out there. There's really mediocre community organizing, and there's really effective. So, have hope. It's possible. Yeah. As there is, there are really good churches and really bad churches and really mediocre churches. So,
teach me how to move conservative churches.
Yeah. I'll do that. We'll work on that.
Yeah. Last year you asked us to create a organizing plan. Is that something that we have to do this year too? You didn't cover
that. You have a personal plan, and at the end, that's how you want to use this in your own life. I don't call that quite an organizing plan, because you are, it's how you want to use this in your own life. You're not all going to be community organizers. So you will use some of this in your life, right? In other ways. And then the case study, you will take a case study. It is a real case study. It isn't a problem that a community organization is acting on. And you will utilize, that's your final exam. You will utilize what you've learned in the class to come up with an organizing plan for that. I'll also send you at the end a report on what they actually did in that campaign. But I don't want you to like look it up. I really want you to do it yourself.
What other classes do you teach?
Well, I basically just I teach different versions of this class. So I do teach classes that are focused much more on community development. I teach classes that are really focused on the Hispanic community. I teach classes that are much more focused on the advocacy process. Different, but they're all on the same basic question of how do you transform communities in a way that's fully faith-rooted. And it's always the spectrum on some level from community development, community organizing, and advocacy. But I like this class because we really get to focus in on community organizing, which combines aspects of all three. And I teach at different levels. You know, I teach people in MDiv programs, and I teach people in DMIN programs, and I teach people undergrads. Back teaching undergrads this semester as well, which is actually really fun. They have no experience at all. They're really lively. You know, they're about 18 to 21, so they're really lively. They're very passionate. I do want to say that that part of the gift of having you in this class is that at Fuller, my classes that are not in Spanish are a third international students. And every semester we have people who are working in contexts where people die for community organizing. And their question is always, how do you do it without dying? Or how do you do it without making sure that if you die, it is the cross of Jesus Christ? And that's very important for all of us because it really is a wake-up call. Mm-hmm. You know, this is not, if this is done well, it is not necessarily safe. Mm-hmm. Because it really is coming up against the powers and principalities of this world. So it is more obviously unsafe in places like Myanmar, in Burma. But it can be unsafe in other places as well. And many times it is not unsafe just because it is not really taking on the powers and principalities. And, you know, it doesn't have to be. You know, many of the things that are wrong with our systems don't require a life and death fight to change. They just require a concerted collaborative effort, right? So it's not like the only good work is dangerous. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that it's important to do this, especially if we do it from the root of our faith in a way where we understand that it may be dangerous. And how do we make it as safe as possible? And how do we deal with it if it isn't? Right? So I'm very grateful for your presence because we will have to tackle those questions. And we will.
That's a good note to end it on.
Yeah. So does anyone feel like closing us in prayer? I always like to share the prayer responsibility, not just me. Who else would like to pray?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Our great giver of hope, our provider, our liberator, the God that gives us direction when we don't think there is any, possibilities when we face the impossible. Mm. There's a hope even in despair when we're with you, Jesus, and so we hold that, and we hold it in a precious way, and we see you how you're working in our communities, in the people around us, in the world, and how you're calling us to a further place, a further and deeper, richer place of restoration. May that just be a focus of ours as we go through this class. We're ready. Our hearts, our ears, our eyes, may they continue to be open. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. That was beautiful. Welcome to the class.
Welcome to the struggle.
Well, a lot of you have been in the struggle for a long time. So we will see you all at the residency, and we'll be in touch with you, of course, before that. So blessings. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Okay.